The boardroom of Harrington Technologies was suffocating with silence. 15 engineers, the brightest minds in the company, sat with their heads hung low. On the table lay a sleek prototype of the company's latest product, an advanced medical device meant to save lives. Millions of dollars had been invested, but one fatal flaw refused to be solved. At the head of the table sat Ethan Harrington, the young CEO. His tie was loosened, his hands pressed against his temples, exhaustion clear in his eyes. Just 2 years ago, he had buried his wife after a sudden illness. Since then, he had been raising their 5-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. Work and parenthood had collided in ways he never expected, and the weight of both was crushing him. For months, this invention had been his hope, not just for the company, but for honoring his late wife's dream of helping children with heart conditions. And yet, they had failed. Ethan's voice cracked as he spoke. 15 of the best engineers in the world couldn't fix this. Maybe it's time to shut the project down. Murmurs of defeat filled the room. Some engineers shuffled papers, others avoided his gaze. Hope was slipping away. Just then, the heavy oak doors creaked open. A soft voice said, "Mr. Harrington, sorry to interrupt." It was Maria, Lily's nanny. She was dressed plainly, holding Lily's hand. She wasn't a scientist, not an engineer, just the warm-hearted woman who had been helping raise Ethan's daughter after his wife passed. "Lily was asking for you," Maria said gently, "but I couldn't help overhearing about your machine. May I?" The room erupted in awkward laughter. One of the senior engineers scoffed, "With respect, ma'am, if 15 of us can't solve it, I don't think a nanny will." But Maria didn't flinch. She stepped forward, eyes fixed on the prototype. Ethan, desperate and too tired to object, sighed. "Go ahead." Maria knelt by the device, her hands moving with calm curiosity. She didn't look at the wires and screens the way the engineers had. She looked at the way the small valve connected to the chamber, the way it breathed, like a human body. Then, with nothing more than a hairpin she pulled from her bun, she gently adjusted a pressure release valve, rotated a tiny component by just a fraction, and pressed the button. The machine hummed. The red warning lights flickered, then turned green. The room gasped. "It's stabilizing," one engineer shouted, checking the readings. "She fixed it. 30 seconds. That was all it had taken." Ethan stared in disbelief. How did you do that?" he asked. Maria smiled softly. "I've watched this machine for weeks while bringing Lily to visit you. I don't understand the engineering, but I know how a heartbeat sounds. This one wasn't breathing right. It was too tight. I just loosened it." The engineers were stunned into silence. Ethan's eyes welled with tears, not just because of the solution, but because of the truth in her words. His late wife had always said the heart was more than numbers, more than wires. It was life itself. In Maria, she had seen what they all had missed. The boardroom erupted in applause. Ethan didn't clap. Instead, he stepped forward, voice trembling with gratitude. "Maria, you didn't just save this machine. You saved my wife's dream. You've shown me that brilliance doesn't always come from titles or degrees. Sometimes it comes from love, from noticing the smallest things that matter most." He looked at his daughter, Lily, who hugged Maria's leg tightly. "Daddy," she whispered, "Miss Maria is a hero." That night, Ethan called an emergency meeting, not with his engineers, but with his board of directors. He told them everything, how a nanny had succeeded where experts had failed, and how the company needed to rethink what value truly meant. The next day, Maria was offered not just gratitude, but a permanent place in the company, an advisory role on user experience, with full recognition of her insight. She hesitated, saying she wasn't qualified. Ethan only smiled. "Maria, you remind us all what this company was meant to be about, humanity. That's worth more than any degree." And quietly, something else bloomed between them. Ethan began to notice the kindness in Maria's every action, the way she loved Lily as her own, the way she carried wisdom with humility. What began as gratitude slowly deepened into something neither had expected, a second chance at family. Months later, when the device went to market, saving thousands of children's lives, Ethan stood on stage, cameras flashing. But instead of thanking the 15 engineers first, he turned to the crowd and said, "This invention was saved by a woman the world would never have expected. She wasn't an engineer. She wasn't a scientist. She was a nanny with a kind heart and a sharp eye. And she reminded us that sometimes, the answers are simpler than we think, if we're willing to listen." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Maria sat in the front row, holding Lily, tears streaming down her face. For Ethan, it was no longer about business. It was about honoring love, kindness, and the unexpected heroes life sends us. And as the cameras faded, Ethan whispered to himself, maybe this is what my wife meant all along. Maybe this was the plan. Sparkle's closure. And so, what began as defeat turned into triumph, not because of brilliance in numbers, but because of the brilliance of the heart. A nanny's quiet wisdom changed a company, saved countless lives, and gave a grieving father hope again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more kindness stories that remind us of the power of humanity.